A grand ballroom is shown, filled with elegantly dressed people attending a soiree. The view tightens to a close-up of a man's sharp, intense eyes. This man, identified as Duke Strani, makes his entrance, causing the surrounding women to react with excitement. Duke Strani scans the room, his expression shifting to a cold glare as he mutters to himself. He approaches a dark-haired woman, Stella, and asks if she would care for a drink. Stella smiles, accepting the offer and thanking Lord Claudio. She takes a sip and proclaims that it is delicious. Stella tells Lord Claudio that she has been looking forward to this day and feels honored to stand by his side, but he curtly dismisses her words as unnecessary flattery. She insists, however, that she truly has been looking forward to this moment with him. As another man approaches to greet Lord Claudio, Claudio's expression remains bored and detached. His gaze suddenly shifts, and his eyes widen in shock and alarm. The perspective changes to a hand reaching out desperately. A young, terrified girl is seen calling out for her big bro to help her. The girl is crouched on the floor in distress as two young men look on. She appears panicked and dizzy, her eyes swirling. One of the young men tries to steady the girl, Offie, telling her to get a grip, while she cries that she can't take it and wants to go home immediately. Duke Strani approaches the group with a severe look, demanding to know what they're doing. Offie is frozen in terror, unable to speak clearly. Her brother steps in, supporting Offie as he offers a formal, pleasant greeting to the esteemed Duke Strani. The brother quickly apologizes and says they will leave immediately, as Duke Strani observes that the young lady seems unwell and asks if she is all right. Her brother fabricates an excuse, claiming she is simply tipsy from alcohol she isn't used to, and thanks the Duke, who offers to have a footman prepare a room for her to rest. As the siblings depart, Duke Strani watches them, while another man observes the interaction from a distance. Duke Strani wonders aloud which house the young lady belongs to, noting he has never seen her before. Other guests nearby identify the young man as the eldest son of Count Narv's house and, observing their matching hair and eyes, deduce that Offie must be his sister. A woman comments that the sister is not so much famous as she is known for being sickly and never appearing in society, adding that she certainly looks ill. Duke Strani reflects on this, musing that since the sister never shows her face, it's strange she would attend this specific soiree. The Duke, revealed to be Lord Claudio, silently wishes he could go home and work rather than deal with Duke Strani. Meanwhile, outside in a garden, Offie and her brother sigh in relief. Offie cries that she can't bear it and wants to go home, but her brother reminds her she was the one who insisted on coming. She admits it was only because it was the first time Duke Strani and his fiancée, Lady Stella, were attending together, and she just wanted to be near them. Her brother concedes that a crowded place is too much for Offie, but points out they at least saw the Duke and Lady Stella up close. He suggests they head back once she calms down, and Offie declares she is never coming to such a place again. Her brother thinks to himself that he never expected hearing the couple talk would affect him this way, though he acknowledges that noble marriages are often like that. He dismisses it as not being their concern and asks Offie if she is able to walk, which she confirms. Offie thanks her brother, who replies that she is welcome and that this is nothing new for them. The siblings walk away from the main building, glancing back at the party through the windows. Offie suddenly stops, deciding that she will watch from this spot. She sits among some flowers, wondering what kind they are, but is suddenly startled. She lets out a cry, and her brother calls her name in alarm. Offie feels a presence, stating that there is definitely something nearby as her hand begins to shake uncontrollably. She tells her brother, "It's here," and he urges her to hold on. Her brother insists they back away quickly, saying someone at the palace will surely handle it, but Offie refuses to leave. She firmly says, "No." With a look of dreadful certainty, she explains that she can't leave because she knows what is happening. She insists that someone could get hurt, and she cannot simply pretend she didn't see it. Her brother lets out a long-suffering sigh. Offie apologizes and he relents, agreeing that there is no helping it and they will take care of it. The two of them move through the dark, moonlit grounds. Her brother notes that the area is off-limits and asks what they should do, so Offie suggests they'll just get lost as they always do. He forms a cover story. They will pretend they were heading for the lounge and took a wrong turn. Offie's hand seems to react as she confirms the presence is here, and her brother agrees. She narrows the location down, stating with certainty that it's in this specific corridor. Her brother stares grimly down the dark, empty hallway. He identifies the problem area and says he will arrange for repairs tomorrow, but Offie protests that tomorrow will be too late. She frantically explains that the feeling is critical, it's at its limit, and someone could be hurt at any moment. Offie pleads with her brother, encouraging him that he can do it, making him sigh, "Again, huh?" before he finally agrees to go. He walks cautiously down the corridor, carefully testing the floorboards with each step. He finds the weak spot just as the floorboards break, and he falls through. Offie rushes to the hole, asking if he's okay, and he calls back that it's just a scrape. Offie takes a calming breath, tells him to wait there, and says she'll go get someone. She runs off, crying out for her brother and shouting for help, just as a uniformed staff member arrives and asks if they're all right. The staff member looks at the broken floor, correctly identifying the boards as rotten. He then asks the siblings what they're doing in a corridor designated for staff. Offie's brother, now out of the hole, insists he is fine after being asked if he was injured. The brother smiles sheepishly, explaining that he was trying to find a place for his unwell sister to rest, but they got lost, as they aren't familiar with the castle. Sismond politely declines the staff member's offer to guide them to the infirmary, insisting they are fine. He explains that since his clothes are now dirty and embarrassing, they will just head home, reiterating that the floor simply gave way as they were trying to leave. The staff member then leads the two siblings away from the scene. Elsewhere, Duke Strani, also called Lord Claudio, and the man accompanying him continue to watch the siblings' departure. The man notes how suspicious the pair is, and Claudio wonders what they were really doing. The man speculates that they might have been planting something dangerous, but he finds it illogical that they would then deliberately step on the rotten floor and call for help themselves. He muses that while a normal person like himself cannot guess their motive, perhaps a weirdo like Claudio might have an idea, which prompts an annoyed Claudio to demand who he's calling a weirdo. Claudio grumbles about whose fault his reputation is, but the man quiets him, warning him to keep his voice down because the siblings are still within earshot. As Sismond and Offie walk away, Claudio orders the man to investigate the siblings and keep them under surveillance for a while, an order the man accepts. Claudio then admonishes the man, who he identifies as a director, asking why he left Lady Stella's side and telling him to return to the hall. He reminds the director that he is Stella's fiancé and is attending the soirée as a duke, not a director, so he must escort her properly instead of leaving her with her entourage. The director sighs in resignation as he watches the siblings disappear down the corridor. Some time later, Sismond and Offie are in a carriage, rattling along as they head home. Sismond, identified as Sismond Narv, the head of the Count Narv family, asks Offie what she thought of the long-awaited Duke Strani. She doesn't answer, simply resting her head on his shoulder, prompting him to call her name. Offie? Offie finally responds that from a distance, the Duke appeared beautiful and radiant, but when she saw him up close, she found him truly scary. Sismond laughs, reminding her he'd warned her not to get her hopes up, as the Duke is famously strict and difficult to please. Offie finds it hard to believe he is the younger brother of the gentle king. Sismond explains that when the Duke was still the crown prince, nobles assumed his youth made him easy to handle, but those who approached him carelessly were harshly rebuked and fled in humiliation. Offie acknowledges that this history might explain his demeanor, but she still thinks it strange for him to glare at someone who is just offering a simple greeting. Sismond warns her not to approach the Duke lightly again, calling him extremely perceptive, and points out that the Duke also witnessed her strange thing. Offie retorts that he shouldn't speak so disrespectfully of a high-ranking person and firmly states she has no intention of ever going near him again. The narration clarifies that Ophelia possesses a special ability. She has a heightened sense for wrongness, detecting when something is not where it should be or is in an unnatural state. Whenever she perceives this kind of discrepancy, her hands and feet begin to shake. This is what happened at the soirée, when she reacted to the rotten floorboards and collapsed, but the most troublesome part of her ability is that it doesn't only react to objects. Her body also trembles when people lie to her or speak words that are in discord with their true feelings. This ability to know people's true feelings caused her great pain, and because the world of nobility is filled with flattery and fawning, she avoided society as much as possible, shutting herself away at home. Despite this, she forced herself to attend the crowded soirée, driven by a faint admiration for Lord Claudio. She recalls the moment at the party when she began to tremble, but as she looked at Claudio, her trembling suddenly stopped for an instant. In that moment, she understood. He wasn't lying or faking his emotions. He was simply and truly angry. Back in the carriage, Offie reflects on how frightening his grace was, concluding that she really is not suited for public life. She looks out the window, her expression hardening with resolve. The scene shifts to show the exterior of a large house, presumably the Narv estate. As Sismond helps Offie down from their carriage, the director, having secretly followed them from the palace, watches them from his hiding place behind a tree. 2 weeks after the soiree, someone cheerfully greets Ophelia-chan. Ophelia, broom in hand, shyly returns the good morning, explaining that she and her brother work in the Ministry of Ceremonies Maintenance Division, repairing state-owned buildings. The office is usually empty, as most of the division staff are out on site. A colleague thanks Ophelia-chan for always being so thorough in her work. Ophelia beams, blushing as she brushes off the compliment, saying cleaning is about all she is good for. She continues her work, reflecting that this division is one of the few places she can relax, because she reacts to lies. This place, where her body doesn't shake, is a sanctuary. Her brother, Sismond, arrives, announcing he is back and that their task for the day is to patrol the Ministry of Civil Affairs. They set off in a horse-drawn carriage. In the carriage, Sismond notes that the civil affairs staff have gone to a neighboring country for meetings and want their repairs finished while they are away. Ophelia is visibly nervous, stating she is bad with the flattery from the highly social people there. Ophelia looks out at the civil affairs building, thinking that with its usual occupants gone, she will be able to breathe a little easier. She declares they should find as many repair spots as possible now, so they won't have to return for a while. Her brother is pleased by her sudden motivation, whatever the reason. The two siblings enter the building and begin their inspection, with Ophelia running her hand along a wall to check its condition. As they leave the building, Sismond comments that they wrapped up their inspection smoothly. Sismond tells Offie he needs to return the blueprints and instructs her to go get lunch first, which she agrees to. Ophelia finds a quiet bench in a garden and sits down alone with her lunch basket. She sighs in relief, thinking that rather than the crowded cafeteria, a quiet spot like this is much calmer. A man suddenly appears, greeting the startled Ophelia as "Good day, young lady." Ophelia is so shocked she bites her tongue and cries out. The man begins to walk away, but she calls out for him to wait. She quickly apologizes, explaining she didn't realize he was speaking to her. He, in turn, apologizes for speaking to her so suddenly. Ophelia, now wary, wonders what this stranger could want from her as he smiles. She nervously asks if he needs something from her, which makes her panic internally. The man tells her to calm down. He explains that he simply saw a cute girl and couldn't help but say hi. Ophelia's hands begin to tremble violently, and she clutches them, muttering, "Oh." The man notices her distress and asks if she's okay. Ophelia's eyes widen in fear as she realizes the man is lying. The man, also becoming nervous, continues, saying that if she has time and it's all right, he was hoping they could talk a little. His concern grows as her shaking worsens, and he asks if she has a condition or if she is really not okay, but Ophelia is too panicked to respond clearly. He reaches out his hand toward her, and suddenly, her shaking stops. Ophelia looks up, stunned, realizing that his worry is genuine. The man, now relieved, comments that she seems to feel better. He then gestures to her uniform, confirming it's from the Ministry of Ceremonies and asking if she works there, before requesting her name. As soon as he asks for her name, Ophelia's hand starts shaking again. She realizes with dawning horror that he is lying again. He already knows her name, but is pretending not to. The man, seeing her relapse, suggests taking her to the infirmary, saying she really doesn't look well, but Ophelia, now terrified, bursts out, asking how he knows about her. She spirals into panic, her eyes swirling as she frantically tries to think of a polite way to tell him to go away. The man holds up his hands defensively, insisting he is not suspicious and just happened to pass by, urging her to take deep breaths and calm down. His reassurances have the opposite effect, and Ophelia pleads for him not to hurt her. She frantically explains that while she is a noble, her family is plain and boring, so kidnapping her would bring him no profit, mistaking his intentions entirely as he tries to deny it. In a full-blown panic, she cries out for somebody, for her brother, to help her. Sismond hears her shouts and is seen running toward her location, calling her name. He rushes to her side as the strange man, the director, clicks his tongue in annoyance and turns away. Sismond anxiously asks Offie if she is okay, what happened, and if she can talk. Through her tears, Ophelia explains that a stranger asked for her name, but he already knew it, and he kept insisting he wasn't suspicious even though he was super suspicious. Sismond listens intently, then comforts her, apologizing for leaving her alone, and acknowledging it must have been frightening. Offie, calming down, points out that her brother forgot his handkerchief again. He sheepishly asks if she has a clean one, and she grumbles, honestly. As they walk, Sismond wonders about the incident, questioning if it was an attempted kidnapping inside the palace grounds. He dismisses the idea, concluding it's more likely the man mistook Offie for some other lady. He then tells her to be careful, because she is cute. Offie brushes off his teasing, and Sismond decides he will tell security to keep an eye out just in case. Back in a palace office, Duke Strani, Lord Claudio, looks out the window. He furiously reprimands the director, asking if he is stupid, and yelling that you don't just stroll up to a surveillance target. The director bows his head, offering a truly sorry apology as another man, Angelo, and a woman watch nervously. Claudio demands to know why the director did it, stating he would normally do something like this, and that he saw the NARV file as well. The director explains that the file was so ordinary it fit on one page and seemed unlinked to the case, so he figured he would just ask the girl directly and close the investigation. Claudio looks at him skeptically, asking if that is really the only reason. The director then sheepishly admits that the file mentioned her trembling behind her father or brother, and he thought she seemed so brave and cute, like a little hamster. He continues, explaining that when he saw her eating her lunch all alone in a corner of the garden, he just couldn't take it. He confesses that she reminded him of his own shy little girl, and he just couldn't leave her be. Claudio listens to this explanation, his expression unreadable as he repeats the word, trembling, to himself. He states that a case involving nobles with no common threads is suspicious, and it's the ordinary ones who are the most suspect. The NARV family fits this, receiving no visitors, having servants only by necessities, and rarely going anywhere but home and the Architecture Bureau. Claudio concludes that a one-page report on such a family is fishy to begin with and screams that they are hiding something, making the director flinch. At that moment, Angelo raises his hand and asks if he can chime in. Angelo points out that while the sickly daughter staying home is understandable, it's kinda sus that the Count skips balls too. He argues that even if he's a civil servant, nobles still need to socialize, a point the director tries to brush off. The woman colleague agrees with Angelo, noting that it's true. She has never seen Count Narv at a ball. The director sighs, explaining that the younger staff wouldn't know, as it's become taboo to mention it lately. He elaborates that noble divorces are difficult in their country due to issues of status and assets, so most unhappy couples just stay married. However, over a dozen years ago, one noble couple did go through the hassle and divorced amicably, House Narv. The director explains that the mother later remarried her lover, who was a commoner, and the resulting gossip was so intense that the Count stopped appearing in society. The woman colleague understands, remarking that if that happened, she would hate socializing too. Angelo muses that this was the noble divorce he had heard about. Angelo then jokes that perhaps Count Narv bears a grudge against high society, but Claudio cuts him off with an annoyed ugh. Claudio gives a new order, summon the girl and question her, adding that they should summon her brother, too. The director questions bringing them in together, but Claudio insists that the odd girl won't be able to manage a conversation alone. Angelo perks up, wondering why a girl with something like social anxiety would attend the ball in the first place, but the woman colleague wonders how he can talk to the director like that. Claudio's gaze hardens as he considers Ophelia Narv, a girl who rarely goes out but suddenly appeared at that specific ball, wondering what she could be plotting. The next day, Ophelia is back at work sweeping, reflecting on how awful yesterday was as she visualizes the director's face. She clutches her broom, desperately wishing for the day to end peacefully, with nothing happening. Just then, Angelo and the woman colleague from Claudio's office appear before her, cooing, "Hello." Ophelia freezes in horror, her wish for a peaceful day instantly shattered. Ophelia is struck with a crushing feeling of existential doom. She stares wide-eyed and horrified, questioning what kind of unbelievable situation this is. As she and Sismond are escorted toward a carriage by Angelo and Bruno, Ophelia frantically wonders where on earth they are being taken. Inside the carriage, Sismond and Ophelia sit together, hunched over with visible tension. The scene transitions to the outside, signaling a journey has concluded, and they have arrived once again. Bruno and Angelo reintroduce themselves as being from the Ministry of Justice and request the siblings' cooperation with an investigation, which shocks Ophelia and Sismond. Sismond recalls with dread that the Ministry of Justice's main function is to interrogate captured criminals. Ophelia is visually stunned, unable to process the shocking development. She stammers in terror, loudly protesting that she is innocent and hasn't committed anything. The deputy director, Samuel Annell, enters the room, and Ophelia instantly recognizes him as the kidnapper from yesterday. Samuel's cheerful entry causes a burst of laughter from Angelo and Bruno, while Sismond is utterly shocked to realize this guy is involved. Sismond and Ophelia sit side by side on a large, expensive sofa in an elegant room. Sismond whispers his frantic thought that this must be a whole organized kidnapping as a foot steps into view and an unseen person clicks their tongue in disbelief at the siblings' apparent idiocy. Duke Strani, or Claudio, enters the opulent room, adjusting his tie with a focused expression. Ophelia's face contorts with sheer terror at his powerful presence. The high ceiling and large windows confirm the setting is Duke Strani's official residence. The deputy director, Samuel, formally introduces himself and politely begins the questioning about the events of yesterday. Sismond asks nervously what the ministry needs from them, as Claudio glares intensely at Sismond's face. Angelo calls his superior, Claudio, chief, and tells him to step out because his oppressive pressure is off the charts, an observation Samuel confirms, saying conversation is impossible in such a strained atmosphere. Samuel asks the siblings to confirm their Lord Bernald and Lady Ophelia, which Sismond does, noticing that Ophelia is not shaking, confirming Samuel is not currently deceiving them. Samuel apologizes for his abrupt approach yesterday and confirms, as they might have guessed, that the ministry has been investigating their surroundings. Claudio taps his shoe and notes that asking them directly will be much faster. Samuel then asks the siblings if they truly failed to notice the surveillance that was already around them. Claudio takes charge of the interrogation, directly asking the two of them why they chose to attend the recent noble soiree. Sismond stammers an embarrassed and formal reply that they are both of an age where they should be looking for a fiancé. Samuel challenges this explanation by pointing out that Lady Narve has reportedly never attended a ball before. Ophelia recoils dramatically, her face showing distress at the sudden exposure. Sismond quickly apologizes for his sister, explaining that she is simply not good with crowds. Claudio concedes that he will accept their statement that they attended to find partners as nobles. He shifts the focus, demanding to know what they did and precisely where they went immediately after leaving the venue. Sismond hesitates, only managing to whisper, "We." Claudio leans forward, pressing the question with a single, challenging word. "Where?" Sismond then claims they simply went home because they figured such flashy places did not suit them, prompting Claudio to instantly call him out, stating they had the siblings under surveillance. Claudio maintains his hard gaze, signaling he will ask the question again. He repeats the phrase, his voice intensifying. After leaving the hall, "Where did you head?" he finishes, leaving both Sismond and Ophelia wide-eyed and deeply distressed. Sismond panics, quickly stammering that his sister could not walk, so they got lost while looking for a quiet lounge. Ophelia suddenly begins to tremble violently, prompting Samuel to order a colleague to bring her hot tea because she looks extremely unwell. Claudio watches Ophelia's shaking, his expression remaining thoughtful and suspicious. Bruno, the attendant, brings the tea and questions Sismond why he specifically headed for that corridor, noting that his steps were remarkably steady for a person who claimed to be lost. Bruno offers the tea to Ophelia as Angelo hands a towel to the sweating Sismond. Bruno politely asks Lady Narve if she requires sugar or milk in her tea. Ophelia is overwhelmed with dizziness, thinking she cannot possibly drink anything at such a stressful moment. The ministry staff smile pleasantly, a gesture of encouragement that only increases the palpable tension. Claudio's voice cuts through the silence, ordering the siblings to provide an honest answer without lies or deception. He stares at them intently and demands to know precisely how they were aware that those floorboards were rotten. Ophelia, looking down, realizes the tension is so high that she is currently not shaking. She correctly deduces that Claudio is not fishing for information, but is already certain of their prior knowledge. Claudio continues his accusation, pointing out they are repair staff from the Architectural Bureau and suggests they planted the damage themselves while purportedly inspecting. Claudio's eyes narrow to slits, expressing his deep suspicion. He presses the final point, asking why they would deliberately step on the rotten boards to cause a public commotion. Sismond attempts to deny they wanted to make a scene, but Ophelia's composure breaks, and she tells her brother she simply cannot keep up the lie. Ophelia states they are asking questions to which they already know the answers because the ministry staff watched them and already know about them. She tells Sismond that the mere thought of trying to lie in this situation is impossible for them. Claudio tells them they should speak now if they are finally willing to talk, but Ophelia turns to Sismond, pleading for him to take the lead since she cannot. Claudio is visibly frustrated, thinking he has never had to speak in front of so many people and refusing to speak first. Claudio finally snaps, yelling an ultimatum for either of them to talk now, as splinters fly from the table, terrifying Ophelia and Sismond. Ophelia bursts into tears, crying out that His Grace is simply too angry. Samuel asks Claudio to be quiet because he is being scary, but Claudio snaps back that they're the ones who are being noisy and loud. Sismond takes a deep breath and finally says he will speak, but notes he has never told anyone outside the family and cannot be sure he'll explain it well. He reveals that his sister, Ophelia, possesses the ability to sense when people or inanimate objects are lying. Deputy Director Samuel looks slightly baffled after hearing Ophelia can detect lying. Sismond explains that Ophelia's hands and feet uncontrollably tremble whenever her body gets near something that isn't as it should be, an ability triggered at the soiree when she stumbled and fell near the covered walkway. Sismond continues, stating they went to confirm the anomaly, though they do not know the exact cause of the tremor. Samuel nods thoughtfully and muses, while Claudio simply instructs them to continue with a calm, cold gaze. Sismond reports that after finding no issue with the outer wall, they checked the inner corridor and narrowed the area down, eventually leading him to step on the floor to check directly, at which point he instantly fell. He clarifies that the sensation was caused by the floorboards being so rotten they were unfit to walk on, having lost what a floorboard should be, effectively failed as a floorboard. Claudio digests this, reframing the ability as detecting discrepancy rather than just a simple lie, and asks Sismond if that is indeed why his sister's body trembled. Sismond nods in confirmation, but Claudio stares at him with flat disbelief and questions if they truly expect him to believe that. Claudio turns to his attendant, Angelo, and curtly orders him to quickly tell a lie. Angelo, standing behind the siblings, smiles brightly and states, "I'm a woman," causing Ophelia to flinch and begin violently shaking. Claudio then criticizes the lie as too obvious and demands Angelo state something deeply personal. Angelo asks his female colleague about Merlin from General Affairs, which causes Ophelia to furiously shake and point out that this is a lie. Angelo hangs his head, admitting the truth, that he was dumped. Ophelia's violent shaking instantly stops. Claudio observes the successful test and notes that Ophelia can judge the truth of words only. Samuel decides to test her, first stating that he had beef stew for breakfast, which passes. Then he says he woke at 6 and immediately began training, which causes Ophelia to violently tremble. Samuel then accurately recounts his actual, truthful morning routine, having tea, riding to work, checking his incoming letters, and carefully answering them. He concludes with the statement, "I worked diligently," and Ophelia's shaking stops. Ophelia hesitantly explains that since the speaker, Samuel, genuinely believes he worked diligently, her ability does not register it as a lie. Claudio then calls upon Bruno, the female attendant, to state a fact. Bruno begins listing her descriptions of Duke Strani as extremely kind, easygoing, always smiling, and someone who never neglects his subordinates. Ophelia shakes so hard, she looks like she is vibrating apart, while Samuel bursts out laughing that he has never heard the director shout. Claudio, stone-faced, informs his staff that he now knows their true opinions, but they insist they merely stated the truth. Angelo then asks the chief to try lying too, but Claudio flatly refuses, stating, "I do not lie." Ophelia instantly begins to tremble violently, proving Claudio's refusal is a lie, and she questions if people who never lie can even exist. Claudio, having confirmed the strange ability, remarks, that reminds me," adding he has just the thing. Claudio pulls a small, dark box from his attendant, asking, "What's that?" as the staff murmur in understanding. I see." Claudio addresses Lady Narv with a serious tone. He places a silver coin in her hand and asks, "What's this?" and she correctly identifies it as a silver coin. Samuel then holds up a second, identical-looking coin and asks, "Then this," causing Ophelia to flinch and begin to shake. Claudio asks if the coin is counterfeit. Ophelia, shaking, replies that while one cannot spot it by sight, the coin is indeed a fake, leaving Samuel deeply impressed. Claudio then lays out several banknotes on the table, which Ophelia, trembling, correctly identifies, noting her 100% accuracy. Samuel remarks that the forensics team would love her help, as there are many unchecked items, but Ophelia demurs, mumbling that she just shook. Claudio looks at Ophelia, acknowledges her unique skill, and says, "Well done," calling the ability worth praising. Ophelia stares back at him, her eyes wide with total shock. Internally, she repeats the word, praised. She clutches her chest, realizing that her strange and difficult ability has been praised for the very first time in her life. A small, almost imperceptible grin crosses Claudio's handsome face. Ophelia's perception of the room seems to tilt into a dizzying void. She thinks to herself that something feels off. A formal transfer notice is posted, reassigning Ophelia Narv from the Ministry of Ceremonies to the Ministry of Justice, Director's Office, under the title of Building Inspection. Ophelia stares at the notice in wide-eyed, anxious shock. She reads the board, her mind reeling as she wonders why she is being sent to the Ministry Director's Office, which she knows is Duke Strani's domain. Her colleagues from the Maintenance Division suddenly surround her, calling out her name in excitement. They congratulate her, calling the move to the director's office amazing, but their enthusiasm only overwhelms Ophelia, sending her into a dizzy panic. Later, she stands nervously outside a door, which creaks open. Her brother, Sismond, greets her and confirms that her transfer paperwork is now complete. He tries to reassure her, explaining that their father was right. The transfer is only temporary, and he was told she would be back soon. Ophelia's eyes fill with tears as she looks at her brother, unable to speak. Sismond calls her name, Offie, with concern as she tearfully points out that he forgot his handkerchief again. He apologizes, admitting he didn't even bring one today. She chides him, reminding him to carry one properly, since she won't be there with him anymore, and he quietly agrees. The scene flashes back to their home, where their father, Ber, first heard the news and yelled, "Transfer?" The family, father, Sismond, and Ophelia, are seen discussing the situation in their study. Sismond, identified as Bernardo, is furious, realizing the director's infuriating grin during the interrogation was about this, but his father scolds him for speaking ill of a duke. Ophelia, meanwhile, collapses in tears, crying that she absolutely cannot go somewhere alone. Their father gently explains to Offie that His Grace, Duke Strani, came to him personally to request her help, making it an order he cannot refuse. Bernardo argues back, saying he investigated the matter and is convinced they will force Offie to judge the testimony of vicious criminals, something he will not allow. Their father clarifies that, while he lacks details, he was assured Ophelia will not meet suspects directly. Furthermore, it is only a short-term secondment until they resolve a difficult case. Bernardo shouts back that he doesn't buy it. Their father sighs, telling Bernardo, Ber, that Ophelia also needs to learn to interact with people properly, a point Bernardo reluctantly concedes with a groan. The father turns to a weeping Offie and tells her to at least try going first. He reveals he managed to add one condition. If it proves to be truly impossible for her, she is allowed to return, though Offie just wails that it's already impossible. Her father insists she try, warning her that if she continues to cling to Bernardo, he will never be able to marry. He then teases his son, calling him pitiful for having no prospects at his age. Ophelia immediately stops crying and mutters that the no prospects issue is just because her brother isn't popular. Bernardo is horrified, realizing she isn't shaking and that this is her honest belief. He shouts her name as she flees, and he gives chase. Their father chuckles at the scene, reminding them he won't be around forever and Offie will need to marry, too. This just makes Ophelia cry for him not to die, and he reassures her he isn't planning on it yet. He comforts his tearful daughter, telling her he will grow old before she does. Holding her close, he gently explains that he can't protect her forever and that she needs to try a little harder on her own. He then tells Bernardo to think about his own future as well, cutting off his protest by stating the matter is decided and the order will arrive in a few days. The flashback ends, showing Ophelia in the present, her expression now one of quiet determination. Sismond, seeing her off, tries to lighten the mood, joking that it's fine, and she'll likely prove useless and be kicked out immediately. Ophelia smiles faintly, agreeing that's probably true. A carriage wheel clatters on the cobblestone drive of the ministry. Ophelia stands before the massive building, looking up at it with apprehension. A sudden Kia echoes from nearby, startling her. Sismond waves goodbye from his own carriage, encouraging her to do her best as she turns to leave. She stands alone for a moment, a small, nervous figure before the grand, imposing entrance of the Ministry of Justice. Clutching her large satchel, Ophelia walks hesitantly down a long, polished hallway. The woman from the interrogation, Bruno, appears and greets her formally. "Good morning, Lady Narv." Startled, Ophelia gives a deep, flustered bow, stammering a "Gee, good morning," and asking them to please take care of me. Bruno, with a small, faint smile, tells her not to be so nervous and gestures for her to follow. As they walk, Bruno explains that the director's office is up the stairs at the back, mentioning it's a bit of a walk but has a nice view. Ophelia internally confirms the woman's name, Bruno-san. Bruno stops at a set of large doors, and Ophelia reflects that while she found Bruno scary at first, she is now sure she's a good person. She stands anxiously before the closed doors to the office. Bruno opens the doors, revealing the large, well-lit office where Duke Strani, Claudio, sits at the main desk, flanked by Samuel and Angelo at their own desks. The walls of the room are lined with towering bookshelves. Samuel looks up and greets her with a cheerful, "Hey, good morning, Lady Narv." Ophelia nervously introduces herself, saying she'll be in their care. Angelo waves enthusiastically, calling "Mornin', Ophelia-chan," while Samuel quietly reminds him to be respectful, as Lady Narv is speaking. Angelo pouts, telling Bruno she was lucky she got to pick Ophelia-chan up, but Bruno simply regards him as a rascal. Claudio interrupts, dropping a stack of papers on Angelo's desk and telling him to finish his paperwork first, reminding him he missed yesterday's deadline. Samuel compliments Ophelia, noting that while her green uniform is nice, she also looks cute in black, which flusters her. Bruno adds that Ophelia shouldn't copy Angelo, who is just sloppy. Angelo cheerfully tells Ophelia they've placed her desk between his and Bruno's, but Bruno bluntly warns her not to rely on Angelo because he's careless, much to his dismay. Bruno gestures for Lady Narv to follow her to the desk. As Ophelia passes Angelo's desk, she suddenly stops, her hand trembling slightly as she warns him that something in his desk might be broken. Angelo looks confused, asking if her knee just buckled. Angelo tries the bottom drawer and finds it stuck, exclaiming, "That's amazing. Can you tell even that?" The rest of the office, including Claudio, watches with curiosity as Ophelia's hand trembles near the drawer. Ophelia asks for permission, then expertly jiggles the drawer, which creaks open. Angelo is ecstatic, thanking her profusely and calling her a true pro. Ophelia beams with a genuine, happy hee, explaining that she used to work in repairs. Bruno watches with a slight smile, while Claudio observes the scene from his desk. Claudio's expression suddenly sours as he spots the contents of the drawer, yelling in disgust, "Ugh, you slob." He orders Angelo to take the moldy object, which Angelo tearfully identifies as the first and last cookie Merlin-chan gave me, directly to the incinerator outside, not just the bin, snapping, "Don't care," at his protests. Claudio commands him to clean out every drawer today and move it. Now, his sudden shout making Ophelia jump in fright. Noticing Ophelia's panicked Howa state, Claudio turns his sharp gaze on her, calling out, "Hey, you dash." He snaps, "Are you listening, Ophelia Narv?" which jolts her to attention with a "Why yes." Samuel, sipping his drink, looks on, amused at how fast Claudio's mood changed. Claudio gets straight to the point, informing her that starting tomorrow, she will sit in on suspect interrogations. He clarifies that, aside from that, she has no other duties and can do whatever she wants, as long as she does it quietly. He then tells Bruno to show her around, dismissing her. Claudio watches her leave the room, while Samuel gives her a discreet, friendly wave goodbye. The focus closes in on Ophelia's bright, sparkling eyes, a stark contrast to her previous fear. As Ophelia exits, she gives a small, respectful bow. Claudio watches her go. Bruno follows her out, noting Ophelia's unusually large bag and commenting that it's full of repair tools. The scene flashes back to Ophelia's radiant smile just moments before, after she had fixed the desk drawer. Claudio sits alone, musing to himself about her, wondering why she would go so far for others and questioning if she is always so kind, or perhaps just meddlesome. He sighs, realizing he can't treat her like his usual staff, as Samuel had warned him to be gentle. For the sake of Count Narv, who trusted them with his daughter, he must be more careful, especially since he already yelled at her. He rubs his temple, resolving that he will have to watch himself around her. His thoughts are shattered by Angelo, who excitedly pulls a moldy document from the cleaned-out drawer, shouting, "Chief, look. The report I lost a month ago." Claudio, enraged, simply shouts, "Go toss it out." Bruno explains to Ophelia that the director's office handles interrogations of high-ranking nobles who have committed crimes, as they often refuse to speak with lower-status officials. She confirms Ophelia knows the director, Duke Strani, is the king's younger brother, which Ophelia acknowledges she'd heard. Bruno adds that the Duke, being practically the second highest rank and an inflexible hardliner, is perfectly suited for this role since no one in the country can defy him. They arrive at the ministry cafeteria, and Bruno asks Ophelia if she drinks coffee, which she does. Ophelia takes tentative sips from her cup. The warm drink seems to relax her slightly. Bruno encourages Ophelia to ask any questions she might have, noting it might be easier here than in the director's office. Ophelia nervously confirms she does have questions. She considers what to ask first. Bruno waits patiently while sipping her own drink. Ophelia asks Bruno Sama her age and how long she has worked there. Bruno answers that she is 20, has been with the ministry for about 4 years, and assigned to the director's office for 2. Startled that Bruno is only a year older, Ophelia realizes she must be an elite genius who graduated the academy early. Ophelia expresses admiration for Bruno being in the director's office after only 2 years, feeling inadequate in comparison. Bruno clears her throat, looking slightly uncomfortable. She clarifies that her assignment isn't due to being exceptional. Bruno explains her intense focus on efficiency, while necessary for the increasing paperwork, caused friction with colleagues. Eventually, even her superiors began avoiding her. This led to her being transferred between various departments. No department knew how to handle her until the director personally recruited her. Ophelia reflects aloud that being too capable can indeed cause interpersonal problems. She tells Bruno that, while hesitant to compare, she thinks she understands. Ophelia empathizes, explaining that her own uncontrollable ability has shown her the pain of people drifting away, and she truly admires Bruno for not running away from her situation. Bruno looks surprised, then softly replies, "Thank you." She smiles, adding that receiving praise from someone who genuinely doesn't lie feels especially pleasing. Ophelia then asks if the others, like Angelo and Samuel, were also personally scouted by the director, but Bruno says, "No, not quite." Bruno reveals that Angelo previously worked interrogating common criminals and excelled at torture, which horrifies Ophelia. She elaborates that Angelo's habit of smiling during torture caused psychological distress among his coworkers, leading the director's office to essentially take custody of him before he completely broke down. Ophelia notes her hands aren't shaking, confirming Bruno's disturbing story about Angelo is true. Bruno advises her never to mention his former unit to him. Bruno then offers warnings about the director. He detests lies and flattery, becomes furious if his appearance is teased, but is straightforward and easy to read. The key is not to get on his nerves, which Ophelia internally groans sounds like a hassle. Asking about Lord Samuel, the vice director, Bruno assures her he's exactly as he appears with nothing specific to worry about, though Ophelia privately muses that everyone in this office seems weird. Bruno adds, however, that despite being the director's milk brother, Samuel constantly annoys the director and gets yelled at daily. Ophelia thinks that sounds rough and wishes she could return to her old bureau soon. Bruno gives Ophelia a knowing look. Bruno leans closer, stating there's one more important thing. She tells Ophelia her ability is wonderful and they welcome her, but then directly quotes Ophelia's internal thought, "I want to go back to the architectural bureau soon," revealing she somehow knew. Stunned, Ophelia mentally questions if she could perhaps stay here a little longer after all. The scene shifts to the exterior of the ministry building, shining brightly. Sunlight glints off the windows. Back in her assigned room, Ophelia fumbles while trying to tie her new uniform's tie, sighing in frustration before finally getting it right. She looks at her reflection with newfound determination. Okay. The next morning, Ophelia arrives at the office and greets everyone brightly. Samuel returns the greeting, acknowledging that today is the day for her first interrogation. Ophelia confirms enthusiastically, ready to participate. She recalls Claudio's praise, "Your ability is wonderful," and, despite feeling useless, resolves to live up to everyone's expectations. Brimming with slightly naive determination, she mentally cheers herself on to do her best, even though she has no idea what she's doing. Angelo leads her towards the interrogation area, and she nervously asks if it's acceptable for her to come empty-handed. He reassures her it's fine since she's just on standby, something Bruno also confirmed. Entering a different room, Ophelia notes the absence of the director and Lord Samuel, asking if the interrogation will happen here. Angelo replies, "Nope," explaining the actual interrogation rooms are located far away. He guides her through another door into a small, adjacent room, saying they will watch from here. He positions her in front of a large window, explaining it's a one-way magic mirror from the Ministry of Magic that looks like a plain wall from the interrogation room side. Ophelia apologizes for bumping into him. Ophelia now understands what her father meant by, "You won't meet the suspect," and asks about the purpose of this setup. Angelo explains that since suspects brought here only lie, she will listen from this observation room. He adds thoughtfully that he put a chair there in case she fell from shaking. Ophelia thanks Angelo-sama for his consideration regarding the chair, but he just chuckles mysteriously. He admits the chair setup was actually the director's instruction, explaining Claudio saw her fall during the ability test the other day and was apparently worried about her. Ophelia is flabbergasted that the director was worried. She recalls Claudio's intense gaze during the test, which she interpreted as anger, but now wonders if it was concern instead, though she still feels it looked like anger. Angelo puts on a jeweled earpiece, calling it another super dangerous magic gadget from the Ministry of Magic. He demonstrates that it allows secret communication with someone wearing the paired piece, though Ophelia mentally questions the super dangerous description. Ophelia asks if only the Ministry of Magic creates such tools, and then wonders if they could use mana-based magic to force confessions. Angelo explains that mind-affecting magic is forbidden as it's dangerous, unreliable, can cause psychological damage, and wouldn't yield credible evidence. Ophelia understands, realizing such magic could make someone say whatever the caster wanted, rendering her ability useless in distinguishing truth. Angelo adds that the current director is particularly strict about avoiding false charges, but then gets a dark look, implying he might step in if an interrogation stalls, making Ophelia nervously wonder if he'll join. Angelo finishes adjusting his earpiece, declares they're ready, and informs a confused Ophelia that she's good to go as well. He announces, "All right, let's begin." The door to the interrogation room on the other side of the magic mirror clicks open. A large, anxious-looking nobleman enters, flanked by two guards. A nobleman, the suspect, sits nervously at a table in the interrogation room. From the observation room, Angelo instructs Ophelia to keep her eyes fixed on the suspect. Angelo assures Ophelia they can talk normally since they can't be heard from the other room. She confirms the suspect isn't doing anything unusual yet. The door to the interrogation room opens with a click. Duke Strani, Claudio, and Vice Director Samuel stride into the room. Samuel takes a seat opposite the anxious nobleman. Samuel begins the second interrogation session, asking if the suspect feels ready to talk yet, which causes Ophelia to flinch slightly in the observation room. The suspect remains silent, prompting Samuel to warn him that continued silence means he won't be released anytime soon. Watching Samuel's stern demeanor, Ophelia internally thinks he seems scary. Angelo lightly taps Ophelia's shoulder, reminding her to focus on the suspect, not the vice director. She quickly apologizes. Unseen in the observation room, Claudio watches Ophelia, noting with slight annoyance that she's spacing out during work. Ophelia mentally scolds herself, determined to get it together and prove useful. She observes that she isn't shaking, concluding the magic wall must block her ability slightly, or perhaps it only reacts strongly when people speak lies directly. Inside the interrogation room, Samuel decides to change his line of questioning. He addresses the suspect as Count and bluntly asks if he is plotting something. The Count shifts uncomfortably under the direct question, and Ophelia begins to tremble faintly. Samuel presses further, mentioning the illegal smuggling of foreigners into the country and asking if the Count is using them for something, adding that silence will be taken as confirmation. Angelo listens intently via his earpiece. The Count weakly denies doing anything, but Ophelia trembles violently, indicating a lie. He then amends his statement, admitting he brought foreigners for his factory, but claiming they escaped after arrival. The Count insists he planned to handle all the entry paperwork once they reach the factory and swears that's the whole truth, clenching his fist. The intensity of Ophelia's reaction to this barrage of lies sends her reeling backwards. Angelo catches her, asking if she's all right. Angelo relays through his earpiece that Ophelia is rolling on the floor in agony and can't get up. Samuel glances towards the one-way mirror. Seeing Ophelia's extreme reaction visibly distresses the Count, who shouts frantically that he has done nothing wrong. Upon hearing this desperate, truthful plea, Ophelia's violent trembling instantly stops. Angelo confirms the trembling ceased. Ophelia, recovering, realizes this means the Count genuinely believes he did nothing wrong. Samuel calmly acknowledges the Count's statement with a simple, "I see." However, Samuel immediately contradicts the Count's story, stating they investigated his factory and found no worker shortage, adding he knows the Count was planning a new business venture, which makes the Count protest. The Count angrily demands his release, questioning Samuel's authority, but Samuel coolly replies he'll likely be staying longer, reminding him he's in a comfortable noble's room, unlike the far worse commoner's cells. From the observation room, Claudio watches the exchange, letting out a small sigh. The Count visibly flinches, perhaps sensing Claudio's unseen presence or displeasure. Claudio gives a silent order, and Samuel dismisses the Count, stating that's all for today. Claudio adds that the detention won't be lifted as long as doubts remain, and guards lead the Count away. Angelo rushes over to the exhausted Ophelia, congratulating her enthusiastically on her first interrogation, declaring it went great and praising her as Miss Narv. He helps her up, asking if she can stand, and suggests they head back to the main office. Ophelia stumbles, grabbing her knee in pain. Angelo notices and asks if her leg hurts, realizing the single mat wasn't enough cushioning, and promises to get another one later, teasingly asking if she looks like she's having fun. Angelo suddenly looks concerned, tearing up slightly as he says he felt bad making her put her body on the line like that. His demeanor shifts instantly back to playful embarrassment as he confesses he thought she looked super cute, rolling around in pain, confirming Ophelia's suspicion that he's actually enjoying this sadistic aspect. Ophelia asks if there will be more interrogations. Angelo confirms there are, but says her participation depends on the director and vice director's decision. She reflects on Samuel's praise, not bad at all, but still feels uncertain if she was truly helpful. Claudio continues to watch her from the office doorway. Ophelia looks towards the office, wondering what the director thought of her performance. She worries aloud, fearing he might decide they don't need her after all, and questions what she would do then. Back in the main director's office, Ophelia enters while the others are discussing something. Samuel muses about getting Ophelia an earpiece too, but Claudio dismisses the idea, stating the current distance works fine, and it's better she remains focused only on the suspect without hearing unnecessary chatter. Angelo agrees with the chief's assessment. Bruno notices Ophelia has returned and kindly asks about her knee. Ophelia brushes it off, claiming she's fine and used to falling, which makes Bruno raise an eyebrow but gently advise her not to push too hard. Ophelia internally groans, embarrassed at revealing her clumsiness. Angelo suddenly appears, dramatically presenting Ophelia with a huge armful of cushions he gathered. He declares them so cute and proclaims Ophelia his dream girl because she reacted exactly as he imagined, nearly smothering her. Bruno dryly remarks on Angelo's excessive urge to tease girls he likes, while Angelo cheekily asks Ophelia if he can call her Offie too. Claudio interrupts the teasing, asking Ophelia if she is well enough to attend the next interrogation. Ophelia immediately straightens up and confirms she can. Bruno thanks her and drags Angelo away by the collar, reminding him he gave his word. Claudio watches Bruno haul Angelo out, his expression unreadable. The scene shifts to the ceiling of an empty hallway. Ophelia walks alone down a grand staircase, passing two maids cleaning. One maid notices her and points her out to the other. They whisper that she's the one from the director's office, gossiping about what connections she must have used. They cattily remark that she doesn't even look competent. Ophelia overhears them and sighs sadly, realizing that judgmental gossip exists here too. She feels happy to be needed, but the negativity makes her think she can't stay long. Just then, Angelo's cheerful voice calls out her name. Angelo proudly shows off a massive stack of cushions piled high in the observation room, exclaiming Tata, and telling her now she can fall all she wants without getting hurt. Angelo proudly presents the cushion-filled observation room, declaring it ready for Offie to roll to her heart's content. She thanks him, amazed by the setup. Meanwhile, a different, older nobleman is brought into an interrogation room, angrily demanding to know how long he'll be kept and protesting the disrespect. Duke Strani, Claudio, observes him entering. Claudio watches impassively. The nobleman's suspect glares defiantly. Vice Director Samuel enters the interrogation room, looking thoughtful. He begins questioning the nobleman, stating they know he brought foreigners into the country illegally. In the observation room, Ophelia reacts violently to the suspect's unspoken denial, collapsing onto the cushions as Samuel wonders what his real goal is. The nobleman shouts that he already told them he was merely buying labor from a neighboring country, but Samuel counters, revealing they know he was actually preparing to smuggle someone specific out illegally, along with the group. Samuel dismisses the nobleman's claim about labor, stating they have evidence proving otherwise. Through the earpiece, Angelo confirms to Ophelia that Samuel has proof. The suspect looks momentarily flustered, muttering, "Evidence." He quickly regains composure, denying any such evidence exists, but Samuel correctly interprets his hesitation as knowing something. Samuel leans forward, demanding the suspect answer truthfully, which causes another wave of painful feedback for Ophelia. Samuel directly accuses the nobleman. "Is your goal to betray the kingdom?" The nobleman slams his fist down, vehemently denying it and asserting his loyalty as a noble of the kingdom. Angelo immediately relays, through the earpiece, that Offie stopped trembling. Ophelia watches the suspect intently from the observation window. The nobleman continues his denial, looking genuinely aghast as he insists he would never commit such treason against his majesty. Ophelia stares, surprised by the sudden cessation of her reaction, indicating the nobleman's denial of treason is truthful. A young woman with long hair enthusiastically eats a large sandwich while her blonde-haired male coworker, watching her, thinks of a hamster. The woman, Miss Narv, explains that the Ministry of Justice is becoming much easier to walk through because she has been pointing out all the damaged spots. Her coworker mentions that someone from the Architecture Bureau visited the forensics area, though it wasn't her brother BR, and asks if she wants to meet them, but she just laughs nervously and declines. She confesses she isn't very good at talking to people and lacks close friends, worrying that if she suddenly started shaking during a conversation, it would frighten others. The co-worker, reclining on a sofa, remarks that he must be Offie's very first co-worker then. A dark-haired man named Bruno overhears and muses that this must make him Miss Narv's first senior, which prompts Offie to protest that a senior position isn't fair. Another man, apparently their boss, leans in and cheerfully declares that he must be her first boss. Hearing this, the co-worker on the couch playfully asks Offie what first the director is for her. Offie freezes in panic, realizing they expect a clever answer as she looks at the imposing, silent director. She stammers, trying to find the right words. The director is, Her co-worker suggests, "Your first Gary boss, maybe," just as the director flatly tells the co-worker to get back to work if he's finished eating. Bruno remarks to the director that Miss Narv seems perfectly capable of normal conversation when they're like this, and the director responds, "Yes, but..." Bruno observes that an inability to make small talk or light jokes can make conversations awkward, while the coworker adds that everyone likes to show off or keep secrets sometimes. The coworker boasts about how super comfy the director's office is and teases Offie for not even knowing the meaning of tact before she arrived, leading Bruno to scold him for his careless words. The director looks on with silent exasperation, thinking, "Geez, and you're unbelievable." Bruno earnestly tells Miss Narv that she should treat them like family and not feel she needs to hide anything from the director. The phrase "like family" strikes a chord with Offie, bringing images of her father and brother to her mind. She nervously promises to do her best, leaving Bruno looking puzzled by her reaction. The scene transitions to a view of the office, showing the large windows and high, beamed ceiling. Offie finds herself alone in the room with the director and, after thinking about it, asks him if he has had lunch yet. She slaps her hand on the desk with an "all right," as if coming to a decision. As the director looks away, she calls out, "Wait, director?" She hurries over and offers him a cup of coffee, which he accepts with a simple, thank you." Offie beams with pride and gives a small bow. The director takes a sip while Offie watches, and he then eyes her critically. "Awful," he declares, asking if it's just weak or if she even brewed it properly, and calls her an idiot when she admits she just copied what she saw others do. He tells her to come here, stating that he will teach her how to brew it right, at least this much. Offie is stunned, exclaiming that the director knows how to make his own coffee. The director explains that while he was a prince, he and the king are far apart in age, so he left the castle after the first prince was born and learned to do things himself. He continues, noting that even normal nobles don't make their own coffee, but he finds it faster than trying to find a servant who won't lie. He adds that not many people want to serve a prince who will never be king, and that he's a bit of a nag, pointing out that her knees are shaking, which she quickly denies. He tells her to stop worrying about him if she can't stand straight, and asks if she learned how to brew it, to which she enthusiastically confirms she took detailed notes. Offie takes a careful sip from the cup of coffee they brewed. She smiles, finding it delicious and thinking she can drink it without sugar or milk, which earns a small half from the director. Offie then realizes that the director is the first person she has ever served coffee to. The director responds with another quiet "ha." He looks at her with a slight smile and asks what that's supposed to mean. He then dismisses her, telling her to go make coffee for the others as practice, while Offie stands there, her hands still shaking as she holds her cup. A small, simple, smiling face appears in the panel. As Offie walks away, she reflects that the director truly is a prince after all. The scene shifts to Offie's brother, Bernald, walking along an outdoor veranda of a different building. He sits at a desk where another man greets him, and Bernald returns the greeting. The other man asks Bernald if they are short-staffed now that Offie is gone, but Bernald says it's not really like that. Bernald elaborates that it's just, Offie seems kinda happy where she is. His colleague replies that this is great news, but Bernald just responds with a quiet yeah. Bernald admits he had braced himself, expecting her to come home crying every day, but she isn't like that at all, and seems motivated, prompting his colleague to tease that Big Brother's just lonely. The colleague points out that Bernald and Offie were always together. Bernald thinks about how his little sister, who always used to hide behind him, now steps off her carriage with confidence, smiling and waving. He finds it hard to believe she is letting go of his hand so easily. His colleague mentions seeing their old man earlier, who looked the same as ever, and notes that Bernald seems more shocked by Offie's growth than their father does. Bernald sighs, wishing Offie would come home soon, but his colleague pats his shoulder, telling him he should be proud of her growing up. The colleague waves goodbye, suggesting they go for a drink sometime soon. Bernald sits alone, lost in thought. He muses that Offie's office is full of nobles and a commoner from a scholar family, concluding that people like that are liars and she doesn't need to make close friends. A flashback shows a young Offie crying as Bernald's inner monologue states he never wants to see her hurt like that again. He vows that he will protect her for the rest of his life. The chapter, Episode 8, begins with a carriage driving down a cobblestone street in a European-style town. Inside an office, the director asks Miss Narv if she heard about today's inspection, and she confirms Bruno explained it to her, leading the director to conclude they should be fine. She recounts the briefing. They are currently investigating nobles who are smuggling foreigners in and out of the country. Initially, they suspected a conspiracy to overthrow the kingdom, but no evidence was found, and her lie-detecting ability ruled out that possibility. Bruno, continuing his own investigation, noticed an increase in foreign visitors at the National Museum. Therefore, Bruno has assigned her to investigate the museum alongside the director. Miss Narv, now in a carriage with the director, finishes her explanation. She wonders aloud if the visitors could just be normal tourists, admitting she finds it hard to imagine illegal entrants casually visiting a museum. The director dismisses this, explaining that the popular, fancy museum tourists love is in a better part of the capital. The one they are visiting is old, unimpressive, and currently has no special exhibition, just its dull permanent display. He asks her what the permanent exhibit contains, expressing surprise that she grew up in the country but has never seen it. Offie admits she always avoided crowded places, and the director remarks that her family is far too overprotective. She explains that most of the collection consists of religious paintings from the Euthymius Church, the state religion, prompting the director to note her complete lack of interest. The director asks if she is interested in religion, and when she says no, he replies that he figured as much. He states that while religion can guide the lost, he has no need for it because he doesn't lose his way, a comment Offie expected. As the carriage stops, Offie looks out the window and says, "Ah." She sees a massive, ornate building and asks if it is the Grand Cathedral. The director, noting she's never been there either, decides they will stop by, calling it an impressive building even if he has no business there. Offie protests, waving her hands nervously, saying he doesn't need to trouble himself just for her, but the director clarifies it's not for her. He explains he wants to meet with the Pope, as it's been a while, and tells her to come with him. Offie feels a wave of relief, realizing the visit truly isn't for her, and she focuses on controlling her trembling, insisting to herself, "I'm not shaking." The two of them walk through the gates and along the path toward the cathedral. They walk past other visitors and townspeople in the courtyard. Suddenly, Offie's legs begin to shake violently as she walks. She stumbles, and the director catches her, asking if she's okay as bystanders whisper. She quickly insists she is fine. The director sighs, thinking it can't be helped. He offers his hand to her, but she looks at it with apprehension. Offie hesitantly explains that she thinks holding the arm of someone who is engaged is inappropriate, and the director realizes she is referring to him. He tells her she can't walk as she is and must grab something else, leaving Offie in a panic about what she should hold on to. As she frets about troubling him, The director instructs her to listen carefully. He tells her that he doesn't lie and to ignore every voice but his. He asks, "Got it?" And Offie stares at him, stunned. She replies, "Yes," and her trembling immediately stops. The director smiles faintly, saying, "Huh," and adds that of course it stopped. Offie blushes, her heart pounding at his words. He tells her, "Let's go," and she quickly follows with a "Why yes, sir." They walk along an outdoor stone corridor lined with arches and bushes. The director notes that the Pope seems to be out cleaning and not in his office. Offie is surprised he loves cleaning, remarking that people who serve God are on another level, and the director agrees, calling the Pope a rare, modest man who doesn't waste money. Offie suddenly stops and crouches down. The director asks if she is okay, and she stands up, brushing it off as just losing her balance. She insists she can walk on her own, and says the source of this feels like it's still a bit away, noting no one seems to be ahead. She starts to walk off, exclaiming she thinks something is wrong with the building ahead, but the director tells her to wait and asks where she is going. She places her hand on the wall, insisting something is up ahead, but he grabs her wrist, stating that is precisely why there is no need to go there. She looks back at him, startled by his firm grip. Offie protests that someone might get hurt, but the director retorts that this isn't the point. She isn't a repair worker anymore, and besides, what could she do alone? His words strike her, and she looks at him with wide, tearful eyes. A quiet moment passes, showing only the nearby bushes. Offie suddenly runs past him, yelping, "Eep," as she dashes toward the building. She scrambles up the wall, shouting "Arg," as the director, annoyed, asks if she is to make weird noises just to walk. He watches her with a tired, exasperated expression. A large hand appears, as if to grab her. The hand belongs to the director, who is studying her from below. He reflects that they shouldn't help her so easily. This timid girl who used to hide behind her brother now says someone might get hurt. And for that uncertain reason, she is heading directly toward danger. As she exclaims, "Whoa, that was close." He wonders what is going on with her nerves, noting that she hates it so much she could cry, yet she still pushes forward. Offie, feeling the wall, mutters that it's around here, wishing her brother were there, as he would find the broken part immediately. The director, watching her shake as she inspects the wall, concludes that something must be nearby and asks, "Duke Strani?" A man with a long white beard and a broom, the Pope, appears and states this area is off limits, asking what they are doing. The director apologizes for the unannounced visit, explaining he came to find His Holiness after hearing he wasn't in his office. The Pope laughs, thanking him kindly and saying he was just passing by and thought he'd say hello. He then notices Offie and asks what is the matter with the young lady. The director explains she is one of his subordinates who has a peculiar condition, but it will pass soon and is not to be minded. Offie, however, suddenly points up at the wall, exclaiming, "That's it, I'm sure of it," and tells the director to wait. She warns that a small piece falling from the third floor could be dangerous, as when one tile comes loose, the others around it follow. The Pope agrees this is dangerous and promises to have it repaired immediately. The director looks closely at the wall, wondering to himself if she was shaking that much from so far away over a single loose tile. He spots faint footprints on the wall, realizing someone tried to climb up. He asks the Pope what is on the floor above, and the Pope replies that the second floor is the archive and the third is the Pope's office. As a piece of the wall crumbles, the director stares intently. He tells the Pope it looks like someone tried to break in and that he should be careful. The Pope agrees they should check the archives as well. The director agrees, catching his breath as if he's finally caught up. He decides to increase security and will also request assistance from the Ministry of Defense. The director stares up at the third-floor window, now understanding the true source of the danger. The blonde coworker smiles at the reader, informing them that he will not be appearing in this particular chapter. Miss Narv trails behind the director, walking dejectedly as they depart from the cathedral grounds. She stops to bow deeply, offering a profuse apology for causing such a disturbance. The director, looking annoyed, replies seriously and states he has never encountered anyone who requires so much handling. He asks if she always rushes into situations without thinking, and Offie nervously explains that she rarely goes out and is almost always with her brother during work. He continues to reprimand her, asking what she would have done if a dangerous person had been there and if she truly thought she could escape with her flimsy posture, to which she weakly replies she would have just run somehow. He tells her she has zero sense of danger and that her presence makes him nervous. He begins to scold her, "Hey, listen up," but then pauses, remembering someone named Samuel advising him to be gentle with girls, which confuses Offie. Composing himself, the director sternly orders her to absolutely not act on her own again from now on. Offie, visibly intimidated, stammers, "Why yes, sir," and thinks to herself how scary he is. The director's tone softens as he tells her, "Good job," adding that her actions led them to discover the suspicious footprints. Offie looks up, her expression brightening with surprise and relief, and then turns to admire the beautiful, wow, worthy view from the hill. She comments on the cathedral being on a hill and points to another hill with a nice view, but the director informs her that it is the royal family's graveyard. He tells her to sit and rest, remarking with a sigh that she truly knows nothing and, as the king's brother, her ignorance makes him worry for the country's future. Offie simply stares at him with wide, unblinking eyes. She studies his hair, noticing as petals drift by that its color resembles a pink magnolia. This triggers a memory, and she thinks back to a time when her family still consisted of 4 members. She recalls being a small child at her uncle's house, holding her mother's hand while they watched the trees. The sight was so beautiful that she had forgotten to blink. A vivid image of her mother, smiling fondly, in that moment comes to her mind. Sitting on a stone railing in the present, Offie wonders if her mother would be surprised to learn that she is now working all by herself at the Ministry of Justice. As she sits, her hands resting on the stone begin to tremble violently. She suddenly slips from the railing, crying out, "Wah!" and "Wait!" just as a hand reaches out toward her. A new voice, belonging to a blonde-haired man, asks if she's okay. Offie looks up at him, her eyes wide with shock and brimming with tears. She immediately panics, shouting, "Ah!" and "No!" while the concerned man can only say, "Whoa." He looks around, confused, and asks aloud if this is some sort of attack. As Offie clutches her chest, hyperventilating, the man's shadow falls over her as he says, "Hey," asking if she can hear him and if she has medicine for a chronic condition. The director suddenly intervenes, pulling Offie behind him and shielding her as he orders the blonde man, "Don't touch her," causing the man to recognize him as Claudio. Offie, peering out from behind the director, looks at the new man and thinks, "He's beautiful." The blonde man simply smiles and says, "Ah." He playfully teases Claudio, asking if he's sneaking off for a secret date at the graveyard and calling him naughty. The director curtly tells him to shut up, stating that Offie is his subordinate and warning the man not to go near her again. The blonde man just looks at them and says, He dismisses the tense situation with a, "whatever," but then suggests that if she's that girl, she should see a doctor, while the director tells him to get lost, insisting she will recover once he is gone. With a final hee-hee, the blonde man smiles, wishes the lady well, and departs. Offie, calming down, expresses regret that he left before she could apologize for her rude reaction, and the director asks if she can stand. She confirms she can. The director puts his arm around her shoulders to steady her as they walk. The scene shifts to a simple patterned background. Leaning against him and blushing, Offie stammers a profound apology for all the trouble, but the director just notes that she seems all right now and tells her to grab on. He pulls her slightly closer, warning her that she should not get near that man, which prompts Offie to ask if the director knows him. The director identifies the man as Jean, the head of the Bigot dukedom, adding that it is rare to see him out in public. Offie absorbs this information, quietly responding, I see." They stand together for a moment, looking out over the town and hills. The director elaborates that even he is familiar with Jean because their circumstances are similar. Jean was reportedly very sickly and bedridden as a child and has rarely shown himself in public, even after inheriting his title. Offie thinks back on the strange encounter, noting that while Jean was rude to the director, his words were harmless, and she sensed no malice, yet she shook more than she has since a childhood tea party. She wonders why she reacted so strongly, questioning if a duke would possess the same shallow vanity or bravado as the noble girls, especially since her trembling began before she even saw him. She then recalls the distinct, lonely face he had. A clear image of Jean's beautiful, smiling face fills her mind. She tries to make sense of her feelings, concluding that the warmth of the director's hand and the sensation of dirt on her cheek were real, but the Duke of Bigot's entire presence felt like a lie. The realization shocks her. Just his existence felt wrong. She reasons that even the director was hesitant when speaking about him, which could only mean that he doesn't exist in this world. Her eyes widen in abject terror as she whispers, No way.
Is he?
A ghost? Causing the director, who overheard her, to bluntly tell her not to be stupid. The director dryly adds that, since the graveyard is right there, perhaps her guess isn't entirely wrong, which makes Offie shriek, "Eek!" and urge him to get them going immediately. They finally arrive at the domed museum, where a man in a suit greets them. "We've been expecting you, director." The man offers to be their guide, but the director states they are not there for sightseeing. They came to ask some questions. Inside, the director asks the guide about the recent increase in foreign visitors, and the guide clarifies that while the number is about the same, he has noticed more people who act off, somehow, despite looking like locals. The director speculates they are likely from a nearby country, and the guide agrees that this is his guess as well. The director then asks the crucial question, which painting were these off visitors interested in? The chapter ends with a close-up of a portrait of a woman as the guide exclaims, "Oh my!" A woman in a grand dress, flanked by attendants, addresses Lord Claudio. The director, looking displeased, recognizes her, saying her name, Stella. Stella expresses her happiness at seeing him again, then turns her attention to Offie, inquiring if she is feeling better now. Offie nervously introduces herself as Ophelia Narv, stating it is an honor that Stella remembers her. Stella smiles and confirms she heard Ophelia was the new girl assigned to the director's office, then pointedly asks if the two of them are working together today. The director gives a short, curt "ah" in response, his expression hardening as Offie looks on anxiously. He instructs Offie to go on ahead with the museum staff for the tour of the building, assuring her he will catch up with her later. As the guide leads her away, Offie casts a worried glance back at the director. Stella and the director are left standing alone, facing one another in the museum hall. Meanwhile, the guide shows Offie various exhibits, including framed portraits and a full suit of armor on horseback. They stop before a large triptych of a winged figure, which the guide explains is an angel delivering a message to God, said to be the most beautiful of all angels serving Euthymius. Offie agrees the angel is beautiful, but she privately thinks that both the director and Lord Jean are even prettier. She follows the guide distractedly as he announces that the main exhibits are further in the back. The guide leads her to a large, glass-topped case containing a long object wrapped in cloth. She peers at the display, impressed by its huge size and wondering what the box contains. The guide identifies it as the sacred relic of Euthymius, and Offie blurts out in shock, A dead body." To which the guide calmly replies, "Yes." He quickly clarifies that this is only a replica, as the real one is kept safe at the cathedral, and asks if she wasn't taught this in her national religion class. Offie explains that she was frequently sick as a child and couldn't go to school, earning a sympathetic look from the guide, who remarks that it must have been difficult for her. The guide adds that the relic is enshrined for worship during major ceremonies, and she will likely see it at the upcoming ordination ceremony. Offie internally shrinks, thinking she would rather not see it, while the guide cheerfully asks if she is ready for the next exhibit. Despite her lack of knowledge about paintings or sculptures, Offie finds herself fascinated by the guide's explanations. Lost in thought, she bumps right into the director, who has just returned. The director apologizes to the guide for leaving the girl with him, but the guide, in turn, apologizes for talking too much. Offie, however, insists she truly enjoyed the tour and thanks him profusely. Back in the carriage, the director instructs the guide to report any suspicions before turning to Offie to ask if she noticed anything. Offie replies that nothing seemed dishonest, and the staff only provided standard exhibit explanations. The director then presses, asking specifically about the paintings. Her private, unstated thought is that the director himself looked far prettier than the angel painting. Wisely deciding he would get mad if she said that, she instead just says the angel painting left an impression, which puzzles the director. She pivots, bringing up the relic replica and its connection to the cathedral and the ordination ceremony. The director, exasperated to learn she didn't know this basic fact of the state religion, sighs that her family truly spoils her. He corrects her, explaining the ordination ceremony is for appointing clergy and is held at the palace temple, not the cathedral, which is too small. Offie is stunned, exclaiming that the temple is near the architecture bureau. She sheepishly admits she had no idea, despite the major annual procession for the relic, leading the director to sigh in disbelief. He closes his eye, resigning himself to the fact that it can't be helped. The director reflects internally that her earlier trembling really threw them off, noting that it would look strange to anyone unaware of her condition, even to investigators accustomed to all kinds of criminals. He observes her, thinking that despite enduring a life of rude stares, she somehow managed to grow up kind and without bitterness. He recalls an image of a young, collapsing Ophelia, concluding that while her family's reaction is understandable, it doesn't mean that keeping her locked away from society is the right answer. He muses that protecting someone does not mean simply hiding them away. The director concludes that the real problem is her ridiculously overprotective brother, and this, coupled with Offie's own statements, suggests an unresolved issue. He narrows his eyes, convinced that there is still some hidden truth between the two siblings. Unaware of his thoughts, Offie suddenly shivers from his intense stare, muttering that she's getting chills. A heartwarming illustration shows a young Bernald smiling as he holds his even younger sister, Offie, on his lap while they read a book together. The setting shifts to the present day, showing the exterior of the architecture bureau. Inside, Bernald Narv sits on a sofa, looking utterly exhausted. He looks up with trepidation as a guest enters, nervously asking what brings him here. The visitor is director Claudio, who stands with his arms crossed, his expression serious. The director states that he is the type of person who must investigate things that bother him, and he has come to ask Bernald some questions. He gets directly to the point, addressing Bernald by name and asking if he, like his sister, also possesses a special ability. Bernald begins to stammer, but the director reassures him that he is not there to accuse or threaten him, but is merely curious. Bernald looks down, sweating and conflicted. He finally concedes that the director is right, admitting that while it's not as strong as his sister's, he too has a strange ability. The director says, "I thought so," revealing he was struck by Ophelia's comment at the cathedral about how her brother could find what was broken. He correctly deduces that while Ophelia can sense when something is wrong, she cannot pinpoint the location, whereas Bernald can. Bernald confirms this, explaining he can sense danger, but only in relation to buildings, allowing him to identify when a structure is unsound. The director realizes Bernald was the one who pinpointed the weak location at the soiree. Bernald apologizes for hiding his power, but the director dismisses it, stating that his honest answer is all that matters. The director's questions continue, asking if their parents also have powers, and Bernald elaborates that while his parents' abilities don't manifest physically like his sister's, they do exist. He explains that for generations, the eldest son in his family inherits a power. His great-grandfather had one, his grandfather's relates to weight, and his father's is connected to mathematics. Bernald laments that in his generation, even Offie, who wasn't the eldest son, received a strange and pitiful power, the ability to tremble at lies. The director remarks that this power is precisely why she was so spoiled by her family and grew up without learning basic common sense. He then delivers a sharp observation. "You can't keep her by your side forever." This statement shatters Bernald's composure, and he leaps to his feet. "Offie is," he shouts, beginning an impassioned defense. "Offie is. I'll protect her for the rest of my life," he vows. With tears welling in his eyes, he glares at the director, declaring, "You have no right to tell me otherwise." Bernald is immediately shocked by his own emotional outburst, while the director just stares back at him silently. Bernald quickly collects himself, apologizing for his loss of composure and disrespectful words. The director, unfazed, notes that Bernald's attachment to his sister is a little excessive and asks what caused it, pointedly suggesting, "Your mother?" Bernald looks down, his expression filled with pain. The director quietly waits as Bernald prepares to explain. Bernald describes the reality of noble marriages, which are often political arrangements where spouses take lovers after having children, all while maintaining the pretense of a happy marriage. He states that his family was, for a time, happy. But the day my sister's ability appeared, our peace vanished. He recalls how young Ophelia would tremble, fall, and cry uncontrollably whenever she was near their mother. During these episodes, his father and he could do nothing, and his mother would only look on with a troubled expression. Bernald reveals his parents had to divorce because Ophelia couldn't even stand properly as long as they all kept living a lie, which makes the director realize the true, tragic story behind the amicable Narv divorce. Bernald, clutching his head, confesses that he was devastated when his mother left and that he unfairly blamed his sister. He admits that, deep down, he had always known his mother had a lover, but their family had managed to live in a fragile peace until then. In his anger and grief, he yelled at his little sister, "Why'd you ruin everything?" He even shouted at her, "Give mother back to me." He remembers how young Offie, her cheek bandaged from a fall, just stood and looked at him. She didn't cry, She just absorbed his words. In that moment, he finally realized the truth. Offie had been the one suffering all along, confused by their lying mother and constantly falling and hurting herself as a result. A sad image shows a very young Offie sitting alone, hugging her knees to her chest. Bernald, crying in the present, finishes his story. The one who was hurt was Offie. The director listens to the entire confession, his expression somber as he closes his eyes, then opens them. Wiping his own tears, Bernald repeats his vow. I'll protect Offie for the rest of my life. He then bows deeply before the director, making a desperate plea. So please, give her back to me. The director is later seen walking alone down a long, empty hallway, reflecting on Bernald's story. He recalls Bernald's pained admission. My arrogance hurt others. I'm such a fool. The director thinks to himself. I really am. The scene changes to the director's office, where he is now working at his desk. Offie, standing nearby, senses a heavy and irritable atmosphere in the room ever since the director returned from his outing. Steeling herself, she thinks, all right, picks up a cup of coffee and approaches him. She cheerfully wishes him good work today and offers him the coffee, but he eyes her warily, making her worry she messed up the last batch. He takes a sip, his expression thoughtful. It's become quite drinkable, he comments, and Offie beams, happily crediting his guidance for her improvement. The director then looks at her and stammers, which completely shocks Offie. He's hesitating, she thinks in disbelief, as the director awkwardly explains that even he can choose his words carefully sometimes. He looks away, admitting he has been reflecting a little and never considered that his harsh behavior might hurt someone, suggesting he should rethink how he treats her. Offie stammers, your words can be sharp, yes. She then looks at him with a gentle smile and continues, but I find your honesty really reassuring. So, I don't really want you to change too much, maybe? The director considers this, observing that she prefers people to be direct with her, which she enthusiastically confirms, and he replies, then tell me. He asks her a direct question. Do you ever hate your ability? He prefaces it by acknowledging he's not really in a position to ask, as he is one of the people who keeps making her use it. Offie looks at her hands and replies, I've hated it before. Of course I have. But she recalls her mother's words to her from long ago. This power will help people someday. She explains that she tried to live up to that promise, and because of it, the director and her other colleagues eventually found her and even praised her for her power. She smiles brightly, admitting that although she isn't smart and is clueless about the world, this power that everyone acknowledges, it's something I can be proud of, she concludes, as the director quietly says her name, Ophelia. He takes another sip of coffee and smiles gently, telling her, I'm counting on your work. Keep it up tomorrow. 2. Offie's face lights up with pure, uncomplicated joy. Yes, sir, she replies enthusiastically, as sunlight streams through the office window. A carriage pulls up to a grand gate, coming to a stop. Jean, the Duke of Bigot, steps out and stands before a large building, his expression unreadable.